Hi, and welcome to the Keys to Therapy. Today's episode, we have Hillary as the guest. Hi, Hillary.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I'm excited to talk to you.
Oh, yeah, I'm excited to have you here because now I get to learn some more about you too, which is my favorite part of doing these interviews.
I know.
So,
Yeah,
love it.
cool.
Well, tell the audience a little bit about yourself. Who are you and
Oh,
what do you do?
I'm Hillary Pilotto. I'm an LCPC, and I am in the suburbs of Chicago. I have a virtual therapy practice, and I work with women and moms who most of them have like a professional identity,
Mm,
but are also, mothers and have different roles in their life. And a lot of them are trying to break the cycle of their own upbringing to parent different and connect with their kids different and their partners differently and connect with themselves too. So that's who I see. And I'm certified EMDR therapist. I'm an EMDR consultant in training. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
yay, that's a really good population. Like your niche is like narrowed in. I like
Thank
that.
you. Yeah. Well, I've had help on like finding who I love to work with,
Mhm,
and it's changed over the years of time that I've like practiced.
mhm.
And yeah, it started with adolescence and it's made its way all the way to like working moms with school age kids. That's kind
Yeah,
of what I say. Yeah, if you head to my website, that's like my very, very specific niche. Yeah.
I like that though. Yeah, I feel like for me, every year it ages up. And so I'm like,
Yeah.
ooh, I'm aging out of working with kids. I think the oldest now, well, they're aging up too, but probably like
Yeah.
16, 17. So I keep scooting up. And as they start going to college, I might just like cut it off. It's funny how that happens as you go in your career, you kind of change it up.
100%. Like I think you start getting farther from that population. And I think the
Yeah.
farther you get from that, like the more you want to work with like the one that's above. So like now I'm seeing a lot of women who are, right, I just turned 40 last year.
Oh,
So like one of the things, one of the new kind of populations I'm taking on is like women who are in their late 40s and 50s and who are
mm,
now kind of in this like, the reproductive nightmare of like perimenopause and like going through all of that. So, which is totally new. Like when I started working with adult women, I was working with women who were like pregnant and had
yeah.
babies, and I was in that phase too. So it is just like so funny how it changes, and it's important to know that it can change and it will
Mhm.
change, and it's all good. You're
Yeah.
not married to one thing.
Yeah, I like that though, because I feel like a lot of times people feel like when they graduate, they need to know exactly who they're going to be working with. They
Yeah.
need to know like the ages, they need to know where, they need to know all these things. And it's like you said, that's going to change with your own life cycle and your own experience.
Totally. It's like asking like a high school kid, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I don't know. Like, I didn't know who I wanted to see. I mean, I know who I kind of wanted to see in grad school, but like, that's like, I look like a totally different person than
Right.
I did, like, literally, and like in my clinical, like, prowess. So,
Yeah. So I'll love as we like go through your journey, kind of see how you ended up to where you're at
yeah,
now.
yes,
So,
yeah.
well, to start, what made you want to become a therapist? Like, how'd you get into this field?
So I so I'll just start with like, I was not a great like high school student. I was not a great student. I know like so many people in our field, they'll say like, I was a high achieving like perfectionist. Like that was not me. Still
Mm.
really not me, but definitely not me in school. Like I just never found anything that I like connected with. Like everyone
Mm.
kind of had their subject that they were really good at. And for me, that just wasn't the case.
Mm.
And when I was in my junior or senior year, that was like when I kind of bummed around and took like all my electives, like jewelry making and film and all of that. And one of the classes was intro to psychology. And I was like, I'm just going to take this and see if I like it. And there was something like that shifted for me in that class. It wasn't about therapy, it wasn't about mental health. We were learning about like Freud and theories and like, these old white guys who like started this. And but there was still something that I was like, huh, like I could do this. Like I'm interested in this somehow. I don't know how it's going to fit in with me, but I like it.
Mm.
And around that time, I went to, my mom came to me. She's like, hey, you're graduating. I was going to junior college, girl. I was like not going to like a 4-year because I did not know what I wanted to do. So I went, my mom said to me, hey, like, because you're kind of still figuring things out, like, why don't you go to nail school to like do nails? I'll pay for it. And you can do that like while you go to school and kind of figure out what you want to do. So you don't have to work in restaurants and work at the mall. You can actually have like a legit like job. So I did that and did that while I was in school. And I don't know if you've ever sat down in the nail chair. You're like a therapist when you're like
Yes.
a nail tech.
Oh yeah, I can hear everybody else's stuff. And
Yeah,
I'm
and
like,
you're
should I
like
leave a card?
into it. Right. Like I'm like, just kind of innately nosy. Like that's just how I
Mhm.
am. And so yeah, I would like have these clients. I worked in a spa and I would have these clients that I would see like every week, every 2 weeks, and
Wow.
they would talk to me and I would know about their families and stories and all their kind of drama. And I got to make their nails look pretty. And I was like, this is like they got to leave better than like when they came to see
Mhm.
me. So not that like I knew that then, but I kind of think like that's where my like therapy, like that's where I started,
Yeah.
was there. And I did that for 9 years. And that did work me through, when I went to my 4-year school, I, decided to major in psychology because I did like it. And, just like, just got a BA in psychology and did everything, the research stuff, which I did like then.
Hmm.
Learned all about the theories and graduated. And then I decided in, like right after that to go to graduate school. And actually it was a client of mine who was like a nail client who like sat down in my chair and she was like, hey, have you ever heard of forensic psychology? And I was like, no, like, tell me about that. What is that about? And she was like, well, it's kind of like a newer field. I feel like people don't know about it, but
Hmm.
it's basically like psychology as it applies to like law and like, in mental health law. And like, it's more like, there's definitely like, it's more expansive, but
Mhm.
I was like, oh, this kind of sounds cool. Like, I like this.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's actually, I kind of, I went home and I looked stuff up and I saw like one of the schools in Chicago had a program for it.
Hmm.
And I was like, I'm gonna do that. Like, yeah, and that's what I did. And so that's kind of how I started like that, journey of becoming a therapist, was
Yeah.
going that route.
And it's not linear. It's not, then I was here,
Mhm.
then I went here, and then like some other people's can, or people think it's supposed to be.
Mhm.
So I like that you were like, well, here's this other skill set that I was using while I was figuring out exactly what I wanted to do. And it led you on the
Totally.
path you needed to be on anyway.
I mean, I had so many people like sit down in my chair, like the universe was like there with me, was sending me people, right, who would
Yeah.
sit down in my chair. And yeah, I met so many people and it just helped me like learn I could talk to anybody,
Mm.
because like when you have to sit with someone for an hour and a half, you learn to like those appointments would be so painful if
Yeah.
I couldn't get some conversation going. So I definitely think it taught me like skills
Right.
too. So
Yeah. You just move
yeah,
from the chairs to the couches.
exactly. Yeah,
I mean,
100%. Yeah.
just
And it's so true. It's not like what you were saying, like it's not linear at all. Like it just
mhm.
kind of, and it doesn't have to be. And it's almost like it's better if it's not, because you learn so much along the way.
Yeah.
In those little maybe times where you kind of get off the path and go a different direction. Like that's super important.
Right. And it's going to make you more relatable to clients too, because you
Right.
can just understand more because most people don't follow that traditional expected path.
Right.
Everybody's is a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
So with forensic psychology, what did grad school look like for you? Because did you have like internships or practicums, or were there things that you can remember that you enjoyed or didn't enjoy maybe about your program?
Yeah. So, um, it was a typical like 2-year program. Um, and it was, we had a practicum. So we either had that option of doing like a thesis or a practicum. And
Mhm.
oh my gosh, of course I wanted the hands-on. I didn't want to write a
Yeah.
paper, like no thank you. But we took classes like mental health law. We took classes like working with adult offenders, working with juvenile offenders,
Mm.
that were very, very specific to that, um, you know, that forensic psychology program. And I did like it. It was a good program. Like I said, I graduated like 16 years ago, so it's been like such a long time.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, it was a really good program, and I think it's still like up and running. And I remember people would think I was like going to be on CSI, like when I would tell them what are you going to school for? Because I felt like I was in school forever. So that was like
Um,
something that people would, it wasn't very long. It was like, 6 or 7 years. But like what people would tell me is like, oh, what are you going to school for? Like forensic psychology. Like, oh, you're going to be like on CSI. I'm like,
right. Criminal
not
Minds.
not really on CSI, but like, yeah, like I'm sure they use forensic psychologists like in that realm. But yeah,
Mhm.
I did like it. It was a good program. Um, and I would recommend it, but it's like not what I do at all now, which is like, again, like so funny with what we were talking about.
Yeah, how it evolves.
Yeah.
So continue with that path. What did you do after graduation? Did you get a job right away and like start the licensure process?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. So I worked with, I knew when I was in graduate school that I liked the idea of working with adolescents
Mm.
over adults. And that was because I wanted to work in the Department of Juvenile Justice or like the prison system within Illinois. So, and I just felt more comfortable working with adolescents than working with adults. So I did my practicum at an Illinois youth center in
Mm.
the city of Chicago, and doing working in the mental health um, area there, and seeing clients and doing groups and stuff. And
Mm.
so then when I left there and got my first job, I was a substance abuse counselor
Wow.
at a I think medium security youth detention center, but it was a prison. Like these kids had already been, they've gone to court, and so they've been through the system a lot by the time that I saw them. So I worked with them in groups. I had individual clients, and I worked with both um, guys and girls. Like I started with the adolescent boys, and then moved to the adolescent girls, like in a different facility. And that was a lot.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot to me now, let alone starting
Right.
out.
Like I was like 24. Like some of these kids were 18.
Wow.
Right. So like we were not that far in age. And um, yeah, it was hard work.
Mhm.
And I would love to say, like, I know I got something out of it.
Mhm.
um, and I did, like, I loved my supervisors, and I
Mhm.
really, again, like, learned to talk to people, kind of make up conversation, because like a lot of the kids didn't want to talk. They didn't want to be in
Yeah.
treatment, like this was when like marijuana was not like in Illinois, it's legalized right now, but like that was when like kids were getting like sentenced for, you know, drug charges, and like, they
Right.
were in like, away from their families. And of course they didn't want to do drug treatment.
Yeah, it's all punishment
Um,
to them.
yeah, it was. And so I feel like they taught me a lot. I learned a lot during that time. And I was really excited and happy to like move on to my next thing, which was I don't know if you're familiar with multi-systemic family therapy. I was an
Mm.
MST therapist for about 3.5 years. So I worked
Wow.
with the same kids. They were just kind of out in the world, and I worked with their parents, and I did coaching with them to try and keep them out of the system. So I was going and working with families who lived on the south and west sides of the city, and really all over the city. But yeah, like helping these parents like keep the kids in their home, and like teach them some skills to have that happen. So that was also a lot. That was also hard.
Geez, family therapy is like a
It
whole
was so
nother level.
hard. Yeah, I think that's what scarred me from like wanting to like do any family therapy, like when I went into my private practice, or like even like couples work. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm good with like one person in the room.
Yeah, I think you've
I'm
done
good with
enough
that.
conflict for everyone,
Yes.
honestly.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
geez.
So I did that. And then I went to, I left that role. It was in the same company. So this was all in like the nonprofit world, like
Mm,
agency life. And I went to a substance abuse program in the suburbs of Chicago. And it was, again, it was working with adolescents, and I was the treatment manager. So I ran that program.
mm,
Yeah. And I did that for about 10 months. And then I got, early on when I switched roles, was pregnant with my first son.
mm.
And so once I had him, I decided to take some time off. I took about a year, about 15 months off of work when I had him. And that's kind of when I like reevaluated everything.
Mhm.
And the bug was like kind of placed that maybe I should do private practice. I had always thought about it. And so that's kind of when I started that process, is when my older son was about 15 months old.
Yeah, that makes sense because it's not like with the work you were doing, you could really sustain that many hours, that high of stress, and have a
Mhm.
baby at home.
Right. And I didn't, I I loved the work that was happening within like the treatment center,
Hmm.
but I just had like, I didn't love it enough to go back for 40 hours a week,
Mm-hmm.
that was really, really hard. My
Yeah.
just priorities shifted, and somehow my husband and I like made it work financially, which was like, oh, I know not everyone can do that.
Yeah.
But we did. We somehow like made it work. And I ended up then, so I opened my private practice in 2015.
Mm.
January of 2015, I saw my first client. And that same time I was teaching. I taught a class, a group dynamics class at like where I got my bachelor's.
Oh,
So
cool.
that was like how I like dipped my toe back into working after being off for a little bit. So I just saw clients on the weekends and one evening, and then I taught that course. And
Hmm.
having a toddler, I was like, this is good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Did you like teaching?
Um, I did. Like, yeah, I liked it. I I mean, I never did it again. I don't know if that speaks to like if I liked it a lot, but yeah, I did. I thought it was like definitely interesting because it was so fun to see these people, these kids who, they were in college, and they, may not have been going into psychology, but needed the elective. And so it was fun. Like we got to like, I had them create their own group to
Hmm.
do, and they had to present it. So it was kind of fun. I did like that. And I was close enough to like when I graduated.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I went back, like it's just so like, I think graduate school now is just so different.
Yeah, it's very different. It's weird. I don't know. Even I feel like as I'm talking to people who have been in it more recently, I'm like,
Mhm.
I'm still hearing the same gaps, I think, sometimes in education. Like there's still a
Oh,
lot more
sure.
theory than like practical skills being taught, but I'm hoping it starts to trend more towards the practical because I feel like that's
Mhm.
what a lot of people lack in school. So,
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I agree. And
mm,
then like there's that whole business piece that's just missing.
oh yeah, completely.
Um, so, they don't teach how to do a private practice. So that was the thing too, is I was kind of like learning as I went. I had kind of a mentor who had, her own private practice, and she was helping me set things up. And yeah, without that support,
Hmm.
I would have been totally lost.
Yeah. So did you just stay then like private practice the rest of the time, just kind of like started building on that more in
Mhm.
that time period?
Yeah, so I continue to just see clients a few days a week. And the woman that I was talking about that kind of helped me, she let me use her office space. So I
Hmm.
was limited to the days of the week that I could use it. But my practice continued to grow. Um, and then I had my second son. And when I had him, I had some like postpartum with him.
Mm.
And that at that time when I saw clients in my private practice, I was seeing a lot of kids, I was seeing adolescents, because like that's who I worked with, in my previous job. So that's who I felt comfortable seeing. And so when I saw them, when I when I saw them in the office, like, I knew what to do. I had the skills. And so then when I had my son, I felt like my second son, I felt like I need to change my niche. Like, I feel like I get these like whispers or like
Mhm.
these seeds planted, like, and I had been I had been hearing that for a little bit, like,
Mhm.
your niche needs to change. Like, you're kind of moving away from that adolescent population, and, you're in your 30s now. Like, you had this struggle with, just some postpartum, and, which didn't catch me, which I didn't have until, my son was like 10 months old, which
Mm.
that's not like what they say happens. They say it happens right after you
Yeah.
have the baby. So I did some specialized training with Postpartum Support International and got trained with them and
Wow.
went to go work. I kind of really wanted to immerse myself with women and moms, and working with those clients. So I kept my private practice, but I worked within a OB's office,
Hmm.
another therapist, and it was very like integrative treatment. So like clients, could, have their doctors there, and if the doctors noticed that anything was going on with the client, they could always refer them to us, and they could get the support that they needed. So I did that for
Wow.
like a year. And then my practice started to explode, and this was around 2018. So I was having to turn clients away
Mm.
to go to work for this other practice. And so that's really when 2018 was really when I went and did private practice full time, and, got my own office space, stopped subleasing. And that was good because, like, I think jumping into all that would have been so tough, the
Mhm.
business piece. And so I got to
Yeah.
gradually build
Mhm.
and, yes, get my own lease and do all that. And so it is, I think, just important for clinicians who are newer to know that, like, it's okay to not have to, you don't have to jump in with both feet right away.
Mhm.
You can kind of
Absolutely.
start slow, and that's what I did. And I know some people's jobs are just so terrible that they have to kind of jump in, and they want to jump in, and so I get that too. But it's also okay to just go slow.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I think I planned my practice for a while, like a year and a half or something
Yeah.
before I actually did it,
Hmm.
just to kind of start conceptualizing what that would look like and what I want it to be, and really taking the time to learn the business stuff and like analyze who do I like working with? Because I know who I can work with, but like who do I
Yeah.
like working with? And so I think for you, it's really interesting that while you were doing it part time, you were working with who you'd been comfortable with, probably more of that, well, I can work with them. I know I have.
Yeah,
And then
for
as
sure.
things change, being like, well, who do I actually want to work with and who do I relate
Mhm.
the most to? And that's when you were able to jump in. So like the timing of that really worked out.
Yeah, no, it was good. Like, um I was really somehow, like, at that point, whether it be like my new role as a mother or whatever, like, I was really connected with myself and what I wanted and what felt right, which I think is important too. And because I think, especially in the private practice, like, building world, like, there's so much noise
Mm-hmm.
and there's so much information, right? And which I think is great, but I also think it can just be so overwhelming. So like, I was connected with like what I wanted to do, and it's scary to change like your niche. It's
Yeah.
really scary. And um I just was like grateful that I was kind of at a point where, no, I feel like I have enough, like, not only just like lived experience, but like now I have the actual training and competence in that way. And I think when those two things, for me at least, kind of like match up, like,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a really competent therapist, which I think helps. It's
Yeah.
important.
It's definitely key somewhere in
When
there.
yeah, when we're like, it's, when we just try to like only fake it for like a little bit.
Right.
Um, yeah. So yeah, I do think that that's important, that those things lined up when they did. And like I said, like, my niche has changed. It's
Mm-hmm.
continued to change. I mean, I still see moms that have like younger kiddos,
Mm-hmm.
but not as much. And I really
Mm.
think that that's because, my kids are now, elementary school age. And um I kind of know what goes into that. And I also
Mhm.
know like what I have received with my kids getting older is space.
Mhm.
Like, yes, like we're crazy busy. We have sports now and all that stuff, but like there's a space there um that isn't there when your kids are younger.
Mhm.
When you are in the trenches with babies and toddlers and like you're not trying to do your deep healing
No,
inner child work
we're gonna
because you have like
survive.
literally have like children right here. You are not wanting to go deep like and heal yourself, right?
Yeah.
We're just trying to keep our head above water.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of why I've like now shifted a little bit to the moms with a little bit older kids
Mhm.
because the space is there and they're like some of that noise has gotten freed up and um still love the moms with young kids and
Mhm.
like if it's an ideal client I will take them, but yes, I love the working moms with older kids or just the moms with older kids who are like I've stayed home forever and now
Yeah.
my kids are out of the house and like just this identity shift, so I love working with them too.
Oh, that's so cool. And that's so needed too, because I think
Mhm.
a lot of times people in that population, they don't even realize what they need until they have that space because they haven't thought about themselves in
They
years.
haven't thought about themselves.
And
Yep.
most people aren't asking about them either. It's, oh, how's the baby
Mhm.
or stuff like that. And then once the kid's a
Yeah.
little bit older, they start to realize, like, oh, it's been a while since I've worked on me. And like you said, rebuilding that identity.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just like, just reconnecting with like what they want or what they
Mhm.
like. I've asked clients, we've had simple conversations about like, what do you like to eat for lunch? What's your ideal like evening? Like, and they don't have that answer yet.
Yeah.
And that's like some of the stuff that we work on is just like reconnecting with that. And like
Mhm.
that ultimately will help them be able to like connect with their kids and their partner. And also there's like, healing of some like old family stuff too. Because I think, as women start to have their own kids, like stuff
Mhm.
starts to play out
Oh, yeah.
and
That's
is
almost like the
super
most.
automatic.
Yeah, the most triggers. I've seen that from people being like,
Yeah.
"Are memories popping back up as their kids are in
Yeah.
certain stages of life
Hmm.
that they were in and they had tough times." So, yeah, that's extremely needed. And that's something I feel like, at least I've never heard people really talk about when it's come to parenting, is
Yeah.
you're going to have a lot of flashbacks of these different stages in your life and then
Right.
have to be there for your kids, but also somehow heal from your own
Hmm.
stuff. So you give them the space to do that. Which
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Hmm.
Well, you mentioned the postpartum training. Has there been any other trainings or I don't know, any like groups or things that you've been able to do or take over the years that you think have really helped your practice and your work overall?
Yeah. Well, I love a course and
Mhm.
I love a training,
Yep.
So I've taken many. And I would say like I've gotten something out of every single thing that I've done.
Hmm.
And I just think like, you know, when you put that lens on, like I'm going to try and take something away. I think you can find something to take with
Yeah.
you. Um, and so I always try to do that. But I would say one of the biggest um, like light bulbs in my practice was when I um, took my EMDR basic training.
Mm.
So when I was working with women and I was working in the with the OB's office, I kept seeing like the talking is not working.
Mm.
My clients are still not feeling good. And like, I would work with moms who would have like traumatic losses
Mm.
and difficult births and years of infertility. And just, yeah, the reliving and the talking just was not helping. And so I remember when I was about a week or 2 weeks away from having my second son. I was trying to get all those hours in for my CEUs. And so
Yeah.
I'm like taking all the trainings and I'm in a training and I just happened to go to one, I didn't even know what it was, EMDR therapy.
Hmm.
And I was like, this makes so much sense. Like this is connecting with me. And I'm like, I can't do anything about it right now because I'm about to have this baby. But I'm gonna keep it on the back burner like when I need it. And
Yeah.
so it's one of those things again that I feel like always happens to me, this nagging voice that says like, what about what about that? And so
Mhm.
I did end up taking that. And with that woman that I actually sat with, like 38 months pregnant, like watching her teach, went back to her, and she was my trainer, and then she was my consultant. And I feel like EMDR therapy has really helped me just like give my clients a different option of like, is in a way to heal.
Mhm.
Um, it's like somatic work. It's like, we're doing something, they're seeing and feeling changes.
That's awesome.
And within that work that I've done with EMDR therapy, I've taken like advanced trainings, which have like completely helped my practice and helped me personally because, these are very like didactic. They're like, you're doing the work in the session and like just helping me realize like, oh, you need to go get your own work done on some of this stuff. And so like
Oh,
I
yeah.
did do that a couple like in last year around January 2022, I started seeing my own therapist that did the work that I did and like really helped myself. So like I would say like that training really trickled down to other trainings that have really helped my practice a lot. So
Yeah. And that's a really good point that you made about sometimes when you're doing a new training like that, it really helps to be the client too
mhm,
and see how somebody else does it with you and
yeah,
how you feel in that spot. So then when you are working with clients, you can just speak not only from like the clinical aspect of it, but the personal of how the EMDR might
yeah,
feel or what things may come up. And, you
yes.
get to be on in both chairs. And I think sometimes that's really helpful.
Totally. Yeah, because EMDR therapy, it's different, right?
Hmm.
It's not what we're used to.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like when you're trying to explain to a client like what is going to happen here, having gone through it, it really helps. And like you can
Mhm.
kind of come up with your own analogies and ideas of like what's going to take place because clients I find are typically super open, but
Mhm.
and they just want to get an idea of what's going to happen. So
Yeah. Yeah,
that
and with
helps.
some the clients you're talking about too, because I've worked with quite a few moms, and they're sometimes the hardest to get to talk about themselves.
Mm,
So
yeah.
sometimes there's those blocks there. They don't really know what to talk about or how to talk about it. And I think what's nice about having a tool like EMDR that you can use is you don't really have to talk that much at all. You let
You
your
don't
brain
have
do
to
the
tell
work.
me at all.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know EMDR is known for like that phase 4, the reprocessing and
Mhm.
that, but like, it is like this 8-phase model and, that phase 2, the resource, you know,
Oh, yeah.
building and whether it be an internal resource or an external resource is so helpful. So sometimes, it's even to a point where with some clients, whether it be because they're not ready or because like they just have found um they like where they're at, like with their
Mhm.
resourcing, sometimes we just do that.
Yeah.
And that's really helpful for them. So I think it has the ability to like you can get creative with it.
Mhm.
And it's a great model.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's nice too as a therapist, 'cause like you said, most of the stuff that we're taught in school is it's talk therapy. Talk to them
Talking.
from this angle or bring up that angle or
Yeah.
whatever else. And there's not, at least what I was taught, there wasn't really anything somatic. I don't even remember anybody even saying that word
Mm-mm.
in grad school. So
No.
and if they did, it was like, I don't know, for a definition or something, not even like legit a thing that they
Right.
spoke about in
Yeah.
detail. And
Yeah.
then you start realizing like how much of that affects people. And sometimes that's the main reason they're coming in therapy is because it's finally hit the body part. Like the
Hmm.
physical symptoms are coming up because they've been brushing off the mental. So I think it's
Totally.
nice that you have this training and that you've been pursuing it to be able to help them on pretty much all aspects.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's
I
great.
love it it's my go-to, or in at least parts of it are my go-to. And I
Mhm.
do parts work. Like I did get trained in that like last year. Like that was part of my
Cool.
like part of my advanced EMDR training. Not IFS, but like a different type of parts work.
Hmm.
Um that works with more clients, that are just dissociative and that they kind of struggle with that. So it's been really, really, that has also been super, super helpful, to work with clients in that way.
Yeah, and gives you different language to
Hmm.
approach them with because not everybody speaks the same one, yet most of the stuff we're taught is, like you said, it's all the old white guys. It's like,
Exactly.
here you go. This is it.
Yeah.
Good luck. Hope it applies to all of you in the whole world. Like,
Yeah.
that's just not a thing. So
Mm-mm.
I like that you've got, it sounds like throughout your career, you've built a toolbox with the trainings and the courses and the things
Yeah.
you've taken of here's some business stuff and here's some stuff with this population and
Hmm.
here's some stuff with this one. And so you're able to pull different things out or mix them up depending
Hmm.
on who you have with you. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
awesome.
And it's like and it's unique, right? Like, it's so funny when I have clients who say, like, what do you do for, like, how do you do therapy? Like, I recently had a consult ask me that, and I was like, I don't know, but it just like helps. Like, I can't tell you like exactly like what we do, like, but it
Yeah.
just like makes you feel better. So,
Right.
and I know you really can't like say that, but um it does. It just, when you start you get like a finesse, you get like a way that you do it, and it just
Mhm.
like works.
Yeah. There's a rhythm you develop. But like you said,
Mhm.
with everything else, it takes time.
Yeah,
So I think
totally.
a lot of new therapists are just so worried about not having everything in place or not knowing exactly what path they're on or what they're doing or if they're doing it right. And it's like if you're doing anything at this point, you're probably doing it right because you're trying and you're practicing and you're growing.
Mhm. Yes,
Mhm.
yeah, 100%. And that's why I think, like, whether it be like being a therapist or being a therapist business owner, like, that stuff is going to come up.
Mhm.
And that's why I think it's so important that therapists have their own therapists to like work
Mhm.
through this stuff and like, you know, bring it to their sessions, and so they can heal themselves
Right.
as they do this like very like hard sacred work of like helping other people.
Oh, definitely. And you can tell the ones that haven't done the work because I've worked
Hmm.
with some of them in certain
Yeah.
settings and been like,
Yes.
oh, yeah, you really didn't take that class. You really didn't take that time to like fix
Yeah.
it. But well, I know that that's one tip that you were mentioning for new therapists. Is there anything else that you could think of that maybe you wish you knew earlier in your career or anything that you think would be
Mhm.
helpful for new therapists to consider?
Yeah, I mean, I think just kind of going back to like what I was saying before, which is like just remembering that the path may not just be like a straight path.
Mm-hmm.
There might be, you might have to veer off, you might have to do something different, Um, and I feel like there's no like 100% right way to get started and to do this. And just kind of having that acceptance, that like it might not look the way you exactly want, but you still might end up in that same spot that you
True.
want to.
Yeah.
Um, and just to like limit some of the noise, right? Like, again, there's so much information out there. There's so many courses. It's like it can be so overwhelming, and just you feel overloaded. And just like there's also like you also learn in that like not doing too.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot to learn in that space, which I think is probably the most uncomfortable
Yeah.
for a lot of therapists who do tend to be like, go, 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 do.
Right.
And yeah, just knowing that it's okay to just like coast, like, doing graduate school and like doing your practicum or your internship, and, doing that work. Usually those first few jobs while you get, your license are like, those are that's some heavy duty work.
Which I'll
So
never understand why like the clients with the most like the heaviest issues and the most issues, like systemic issues typically,
yeah,
not just mental health, are the one like the heaviest clients are the ones we get when we all first start
I
our
know.
careers. So it's kind of crazy, but I think you're right.
Yeah.
Like pull what you can, just like you did. It sounds like you pulled everything that you could from working in those places and those
Mhm.
populations and just continue to kind of narrow down whether it was what you did want or what you didn't want as you move through
Yeah.
your career.
Yeah. And I think like, what's good for like one set of people or one person or one therapist, like, might not
Mhm.
work for you, right? Like, I
Yeah.
know, everyone is like so down on like certain like platforms of therapy and stuff, but like sometimes for some people, like, that's going to get their foot in the door to like transitioning out of a job that's like really like hurting their mental health or their
Mhm.
well-being, or, so I just think it's like it's individual, like, to each person, and to like try to just remain free of the judgment, and everyone's got to do what they got to do.
Yeah. And like you said, sometimes a lot of things are stepping stones. It's like short periods of time to get you by,
Mhm.
or like you said, to coast and just
Yeah.
keep working towards whatever it is that you think you want to do next. You don't have
Mhm.
to be doing all the things all the time.
Totally.
It's
Yes.
exhausting.
I know, it's hard.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time
Yeah,
to do this
I'm
today.
so excited to talk with you. This was
Yeah,
great. This is a
I
good conversation.
I know, and I learned so much, and that's, like I said, my favorite part because 'cause I'm like, "Ooh,
Yeah.
I need to ask her offline about this thing."
Yes,
But
totally.
I just love that you shared from a lot of different perspectives, like not having that linear path with grad school,
Mhm.
how your personality, to a certain extent, your preferences for time, for space, for your kids, for whatever else changed, which then
Mhm.
shifted your work. Instead of you trying to put yourself in the box that already existed, you were like, no,
Right.
I'm going to create a life that works better for me.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
think that probably helped your mental health overall
Mhm.
versus people doing the opposite and being like, well, I need to conform to the space I'm in.
Mhm.
So
Yes. Yes.
good lessons in there.
Perfect. Mhm.
Uh, well, underneath the video, I'm going to link your Instagram so everybody can kind of keep up with
Cool.
what you're doing and what you got
Yeah.
going on in your website, since I know that you've been making some changes to it recently. So
Yes.
people can like look at that and read
Uh-huh.
more about your niche. But I just appreciated you taking the time to do this today. And
Yeah.
hopefully everybody learned a little something.
Thank
Uh,
you. Thanks so
yeah.
much for having me.
Yeah, of course. So, for the viewers out there, if you guys can subscribe and stay on top of all the future videos that are coming your way. And I also have an email list that's under there if you want to see what other freebies and discounts are coming. But till next time, so bye, guys.
Bye.